Running a healthcare practice in the US pushes operational heads to be business managers, financial wizards, and patient champions. From navigating insurance labyrinths to tackling staffing gaps, we solve everyday hurdles in both patient care and revenue cycle management. Hello and welcome to the Efficient Care Podcast, a one-of-a-kind podcast series that brings you conversations with healthcare practice leaders and innovators where we deep dive into their journeys and business learnings over the years. I'm Shruti Mehrotra, Head of Marketing at Aarogram. Welcome back to another episode in this fantastic series. Today's episode is a special one which opens an important conversation for healthcare providers. When it comes to patient financial clearance, how do we get provider technology partnerships right? Joining me for this conversation are two amazing guests. Michael Ball, Mike, Vice President of Clinical Services at Neurology Consultants of Dallas, also referred here as NCD, and Kashyap Purani, my colleague and founder at Aarogram, where we specialize in AI-powered patient price transparency and insurance verification automation. We are proud to have Mike's organization NCD as one of Aarogram's customers. This is part one of a two-parter episode where the three of us are in a conversation about Mike's strategies for improving operational efficiency and staff productivity by leveraging technology. In this episode, we deep dive into, amongst other things, what to keep in mind when choosing a revenue management product, Mike's experience working with startups, and their approach to integrating tech with existing practice setups, and managing profitable operations at independent practices. So, buckle up and get ready for a fascinating conversation. Welcome to the podcast, Mike. Thank you so much for being with us. Please tell us a little bit about your professional journey so far.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me. My name is Mike Ball. I'm the VP of Clinical Integrations at Neurology Consultants of Dallas. We're located in North Dallas, and we have about 27 neurologists that span the outpatient and inpatient sectors at several hospitals in Dallas. My job currently is to help facilitate integration of services within our practice, and that kind of maps well with my career path too. I started originally in healthcare as a physical therapy assistant as I was in college, and so I never really had planned to go into healthcare. I just needed a job. You know how that is, right? You just need a job. You got to get through college, and I was going into behavioral health and psychology. But I kind of found a niche opportunity to work in allography EEG studies for concussions and seizure and epilepsy testing at the University of Utah in Salt Lake City. And so my career kind of went down this road of working closely with physicians in outpatient and inpatient settings, doing diagnostic testing, and then gradually working into the surgical suite and doing epilepsy resection testing, diagnosis of epilepsy focuses, and resection of the lobes of the brain that have the epilepsy focus. I did go into administration as I was, growing, and so University of Texas, Southwestern, UT Southwestern over here in Dallas, hired me as an epilepsy manager, neurosciences manager, and I just slowly became more and more in administrative positions. And now I find myself trying to integrate neurology practice services throughout our current practice here at Neurology Consultants. We offer a wide range of services, and so the complexity of how we use those. For example, we have MRI, we have a sleep testing center, we have a pharmacy, we have a rehab. So my job is to integrate how we use all those services for the best outcomes for the patient and how we can make money doing that. So that's kind of my quick notes version of my job and my history.
That's great, Mike. And you and I have worked together for a long time with our projects, and you've been a great partner to us at our Aarogram. You're like a perfect partner in terms of how we collaborate, in terms of implementing those innovations and always thinking about the outcome and the value, right? So I always found you very passionate about utilizing technology to improve the operational efficiency, and you understand both clinical side as well as the administrative side, right? So
Right.
what motivates you, what do you how do you approach working with newer technologies and especially with startups, and what's your motivation? Where does it come from?
I love the concept of startups because they're so flexible and nimble. And so at NCD, we started looking into working more with startups because we think outside the box a little bit more than others. And from my position, there's definitely some interest in working with startups because you guys aren't fully ground in your philosophies about how to do things. You have a concept, you have a great idea, and a lot of times the technology is very well built, but it's adaptable. It's still kind of, fresh, that we can add things to it or we can modify, and you can kind of pivot. You're not going to pivot completely, but you can pivot a little bit to help. And so we started working with your company, for example, to find a solution for authorization support for our practice. And we do sleep testing, which is what you guys specialize in, but we also do MRIs, we do EEGs, long-term EEGs, we do infusions, we do Botox injections, we do several types of services. And so we asked you, hey, we love that you can help us with sleep. How about these tests as well? And going down that road with you has been great because you've been flexible in understanding, okay, if they're not that different than sleep, how hard could it be? And so we've kind of discovered together that there's a great solution with a company like yours, and working with you to find the needs, find the benefits for our patients, but also finding a scalable solution for our practice. So I believe that working with young companies and startup groups has been valuable for us, and then working with technology in general to find new ways to make things more efficient. That's kind of that's one of the things that we focus on. It's a priority for us.
That's awesome, and we are so excited to do what we can achieve together, and what the future could be. And I really like that thing about you, that you are not like satisfied with the status quo. You are thinking about how things could be better, right? And a lot of providers are also thinking like that. But not all the healthcare providers, and we work with, are lucky to have somebody like you. They don't have Mike always to help them, but then it's still important for them to actually make use of this change that is happening. So I want to focus on the other perspective, and then we have a large audience of healthcare providers, practitioners who listen to this podcast. So what can you tell them if they were to evaluate different technological solutions, or evaluate different vendors, or what software programs they want to implement? How can they evaluate those things? Sometimes they get overwhelmed with so many different choices and so many new things coming up. So is there anything practical advice you can share with them, that will help them, to go about how they should approach this?
Yeah, so I could tell you my approach, and I hope that would help others. But from my approach, change is always hard in any practice, whether you're a 3 doctor office or you're a 30 doctor office or you're an academic center with a large group of physicians. Change is tough, but sometimes change is necessary. And so what I've done is I've become somewhat of a focal point for opportunities. And so when there's an opportunity to change, we like to look at a ton of different operational systems. We like to look at whatever vendor comes to us and try to vet it before we push it to a doctor. We have a team, and it's really a tight knit team, but it's our onboarding specialist, it's our referral specialist, it's our operations leader, and we're all non-clinical. We're not physicians. We are very much a business in the sense that we're looking at things from a business standpoint. Does this system make sense? Does it help us, first of all? Because if it doesn't help us, then we know it's going to be a very challenging tool to use. Even if it's a very good clinical tool, if it's not an operational business tool that would help us, it's going to be a difficult challenge. So when we get approached by companies one of the things that we do as due diligence is we'll do demos right away with these groups. Those demos sometimes go pretty well, and sometimes they crash hard. We don't put everything into the demo. For example, we've had a few companies that we know the demo didn't go great, but we had them come back, we have them come on site, look at our practice, and then we continue to look at the demo from the standpoint of, can this solution help us? Even though the demo didn't go good, even if it isn't fully baked, is there some component that could help us? Once we go through that, the next question we ask is we grab a couple key providers that are flexible. Everybody knows providers within their practice that are flexible, that listen. They don't have to be leadership providers. They don't have to be owners or partners. They can just be providers that are willing to try something new. And those are the providers we lean on quite a bit for advice. They're the ones that help us and give us the true feedback of, okay, this does make sense, or this wouldn't really work. With those key providers' feedback, we can then kind of write an assessment of the platform and push it out to our other groups, or our other providers for testing. Along the way, one of the conversations we typically have with these companies or these vendors is, how much of a partner do you want to be with NCD? What do you need out of our group? Because we like to have a very honest, transparent conversation with them. We know that they're going to get feedback, and that feedback is going to help them refine and build their product. That's okay, because that's really what we want to give you. But what else do you want? Do you guys need us to test or beta test a new solution, something that you're trying to do? Is there a way for us to help you advance in your goals as a company? Because we often find that a company will come in and they have goals, and we have goals, and they're the same thing, but we never talk about those in that way as a partner. Once we have those conversations with these platforms that we like and that we work with, it becomes a much easier conversation to have in changes. Like, they adapt better for us. We adapt more for their limitations. We find solutions instead of find complaints about the product. They also don't see us as much of a client as a partner, and so they can call us, they can work with us. In many cases, we work with these vendors on a chat by chat basis, so we loop them into our Teams environment as an external contact, so we can just Teams chat with these vendors. We don't have to do it via email. It's so much easier and seamless when we do this, and all of it is for the purpose of integration into our practice. And once that integration occurs to the doctor and to the patient, we want them to see these platforms as NCD's platforms. We don't want them to see difference. And so that's my goal whenever I integrate a technology. It's to make it seem as if it's a seamless platform, that the patient doesn't see any difference in the company. Maybe there is a different branding or something, but from the standpoint of how it works within NCD, it's a seamless transition. I would recommend to some of the young, or I guess even seasoned administrators, is to highlight and find those doctors within your practice that are willing to try something new. Some of them are young physicians and they want to climb the ladder, but that's great, because they're the physicians that you want to contact a lot. You want to message more. You want to put stuff in front of them more often. That feedback from even the young physicians is incredibly valuable, because physicians in general bring value when their opinions are voiced. If it works, great. If it doesn't, that's still really good feedback, because then you can pivot, you can manage changes based on a physician's feedback. And then as an administrator, I then can start to build more relationships with physicians that are willing to modify, willing to move, willing to be flexible. And they can then trust me that I'll come to them with opportunities. And it's been a very good, positive experience overall to try it that way. And so that's kind of some of my first recommendations on how to integrate.
Like that you covered, you took very comprehensive approach, because a lot of times it's not just about selecting a solution, evaluating and selecting, but also like bringing all of the stakeholders in the picture so that you're more likely to succeed. And you covered the physician side, whether how to go about it. Then you covered the patient experience side, that how it should come out as a single solution, not from different entities, right? And then what about the other stuff like clinical or non-administrative stuff? Like, you still have to get their buy-in and have them make comfortable and sometimes change the behavior as well. Like, how do you get that? Because that also determines the success of any new product and implementation or any new project, right?
Yeah. It's kind of a funny analogy, but it's a lot like Survivor. You have to you gotta build your team, and you gotta get them on board, and then you gotta also politic a little bit with your group. So you have to find, if there are people within your group that are resistant to change, find out why. And so including them on those initial conversations sometimes is very important. So if there is a billing coordinator or somebody, or let's say even an operations manager or a team member within your team that's resistant to change and really hard to get them to adjust to the new platforms, or even listening to a new idea, putting them on the first call with these companies, I've found puts them in a different state of mind, because now you've made your problem their problem, meaning they're looking at it from a totally different angle now, because we don't know if this is a product that would help us. That's what you're here to help me understand. And so I actually don't have to convince them of anything. It's up to the vendor to convince them. And then they start to see it from my point of view, which is, yeah, it's not perfect, but if it's 90% good, is that 10%, can we work with that? And they start to then be a little bit more flexible. Yeah, okay, I get that. That would help. But they got to fix this and they got to fix that. Tell them. And they do. And they just tell them, okay, I like this and this and this, but can you change this? And they start to be involved in the conversation. And then it's easier for me. I'm not fighting with them. I'm not trying to convince them. It's them working with me and the vendor to find a solution. And sometimes it works, and sometimes the vendor's resistant to change, and that's okay. But then they're at least coming from the same perspective I am. And by the end of those conversations, it becomes, we're one, we're united on our side in trying to find solutions, and we're also open to the changes. And as you do that with more and more people within your group that push back, those people feel ownership in the problems. They feel like they're part of the solution because they're actually looking at these vendors closely. You start to see a side of these people that you don't usually see when they think critically about the problem as a whole. They take a step back and look at it from a macro level instead of their day-to-day issues. And so I have no issue. In fact, a lot of the times I will just let other people decide on what to do as we bring them in. And it's not that I'm letting them as much as I'm involving them, and their feedback's sometimes more valuable than mine. So giving up some of my, I guess, decision making to others has been very helpful for me, because then I don't have to fight with them. And I also see a good side of them, and they feel more ownership. So I don't know if that helps, but that's kind of the way I approach it.
Totally makes sense. That's great.
Mike, with your extensive experience, can you please paint a picture for our listeners of the current state of reimbursements for neurology practices? What are the biggest challenges when it comes to getting fairly compensated for services that you provide? And if you can talk about some of your own personal predictions for the future of reimbursement in neurology, that would be great.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a big topic. Neurology experienced a reduction in 2024 for CMS in general. I think, if we were to add up all the different reductions, it was approximately a 3% reduction in overall, reimbursement from CMS. That is a very hard hit, especially when the rate of inflation is high. Rent, real estate is very high, so leasing costs are not going to go down 3% to help you. How do you adjust when you have an off the top 3% change in your revenue? And we, as a practice, have a heavy Medicare population, so we're approximately 35 to 40% Medicare, and we see that also growing because of the population health changes. We're starting to see quite a few dementia, cognitive impairment. We start to see a lot of these chronic conditions, and those patients, when they come to us, they stay with us. And so all of the services that we do under their Medicare policy are reduced. One of the things that Neurology Consultants of Dallas has done to kind of adapt is to offer more ancillary support services within our practice. So we've grown our footprint to offer more like MRI rehab. We have a specialty neuro rehab. We also have a very heavy chronic care management, CM, and remote physiological monitoring practice. That gives us the ability to help patients before they get to an acute critical state. We manage their meds better. We look into the referral networking a lot better when we have a CCM or a chronic care management person. And those are all billable services as well. Those monthly billable services, they're very time consuming, but they're worthwhile. Now, we can do all the services in the world. If we don't get reimbursed, that's a huge problem, right? Because now you're doing the work and then you're not getting paid for it. This is where revenue cycle management, authorizations, and billing are very key. So we focus quite a bit on managing expectations with the patient on eligibility and benefits, making sure they understand what their cost is, and making sure that we give them an accurate estimate. That can be done multiple ways. Our staff, we have an authorization team that works closely, but we also use technology for that purpose. We use it for quick checks as if they've met their deductible, what their benefits are. It's kind of like a viewpoint into what their expectations would be for the services we provide. That also gives them the ability to plan out and bundle their services. So if they've met their deductible in many cases, once they know that, there are very few barriers to doing more tests, or at least to getting the tests done that they need quickly. We found out also that it's very important to review with our physicians their charting and diagnosis codes. And I'm sure any practice manager's like, yeah, that's the most basic thing. But it's very important to do that before they sign off on their charts. We have a very focused group looking at how are the doctors charting? Are they copying and pasting? Are they using the same verbiage? Those things are vital to understanding why we're getting denials. We're getting denials because if a doctor just copies and pastes their previous note into their current note, that doesn't justify the test you ordered today because you didn't order it last time. You're ordering it today. These kind of, I won't say lazy habits, they're trying to be efficient. They're trying to better manage their time. How can we use technology to better help us? One of the things that we're testing out now is how transcription helps us with charting. That voice to text transcription, so listening to the appointment and then summarizing that into a charting note, is a very hot topic. Is it ethical? Is it appropriate? Is it something you want on record where the whole conversation is being recorded? I think that that's a huge conversation in healthcare in general, but for us, it's been very, very nice to be able to summarize those appointments, what really happened in that appointment, into a chart. And going back to what I said about those doctors that are more open to try new things, that's the type of doctor that's trying these things. Now, being very open with the patient and making sure that the patient's aware and that they're okay with that. But anything that we can do to improve not only the charting that goes into the reports will also likewise improve the revenue cycle management on the back end. We'll definitely see improvements if we can do that. So far, we have. It's been an interesting and engaging activity to go down this road with technology and charting.
Regarding the reimbursements bit that we spoke about, which is that I'm seeing a trend where a lot of independent practices are being acquired by larger healthcare groups, and the reimbursement rates for independent practices is one of the big reasons why this is happening. What can independent practices do to resist this? Because I'm sure there are lots of practices who don't want to be acquired by a bigger system. What are they
Well,
doing to stay afloat?
yeah, it's really a good question because you have this problem within private practice that needs a solution. That problem is you have new physicians joining and old physicians retiring. And a private practice, unless it was run very well and efficiently, it is going paycheck to paycheck just to survive. And so any reduction in reimbursement means, okay, somebody's got to cut a check or somebody's going to have to go without a paycheck this week. What if you're an older physician in that practice and you've built that practice for 30 years and you're ready to retire and you have no equity or no buyout or no option to leave with any assets for the work that you've done? It's not like a company where you could just sell a company and then or somebody can buy you out of that company. A private practice is not cash heavy. They do not have a lot of cash, and some of them do because of virtue of the services they provide. But ours, for example, is not one of those. So what we're doing to address that is we're starting to see the long benefits of establishing ancillary services within our practice. Those benefits bring more reimbursable services back to us. So the sleep testing, epilepsy testing, rehab, those are hard to stand up. It is definitely a strategic play, meaning as we acquire more services under our umbrella, we will have a better chance to keep the patient within our network, to keep them within our services. We'll also be able to approach payers with value-based care opportunities. Now, value-based care opportunities mean direct contracts. So direct contracting is a lot of the ways ACOs and large healthcare groups are starting to see benefits. So they'll direct contract with large organizations, large employers. They'll do direct contracting with some of these payers. And so with those direct contracts, they're ensuring that those patients can stay within the network and that you'll get paid without having to go through the revenue cycle hassle. Direct contracts are, I think, going to grow in the future. So you will see quite a few more cash for services outside of the insurance model. So cash pay, concierge healthcare is growing quite a bit, and we're starting to experiment a little bit with that with some services that we offer. You do have to be careful when you do concierge cash services that you don't, once we've identified that other insurance groups don't cover these services. So another way that some practices could benefit from not getting the reimbursements they need and avoiding private equity sales is they can start to look at partnerships with these young companies that you work with. Those partnerships, like Neurology Consultants of Dallas does with some of our vendor groups and our partners, are also a long game, right? You build equity in companies that you trust. You build equity in pre-IPO companies for the hope that they will IPO, they will get acquired, there will be a liquidation event by which you can then capitalize on your partnership. What can a private practice do for a young company? I mean, that's something I would ask Cash, but a private practice could provide incredible value to a young company because there's no red tape. There's no issues with trying to get this implemented into the practice. If you were to go to academic centers or large organizations, implementing one tool can take years. But at a private practice, implementation of a tool could be overnight. And that is invaluable, in my opinion, to some of these young companies. And so NCD's taken a unique approach to approach some of these very neat concept companies that are young, that are also willing to go in on these equity partnership deals. And we don't anticipate any of these to pay off in the next year or two or even 3. Sometimes they will, but in our experience, it takes a long time, but any good thing takes a long time. And so if we can weather this storm of getting through the reimbursement issues, offering more ancillary services, and then looking at revenue uniquely in concierge, but also equity partnerships, that's our way of looking at, okay, this might be our path to wealth and our path also to, prosperity within our practice, so that we don't have to sell part of our practice to stay afloat or to let people retire comfortably.
Thanks for listening to our podcast today. You can find part 2 of this conversation wherever you get your podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to our podcast and leave us a review on your favorite platform. And if you have any questions or comments about today's episode, we'd love to hear from you. You can find Aarogram's LinkedIn and website address in the description box. Thanks again for tuning in.